Chair now recognizes Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York City.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. You know, there's been this question about why would we want to make documented legal pathways to immigration more accessible in this country. It must be due to some political motivation. It must be even treasonous to think that expanded and more orderly pathways to citizenship would be even wanted. But let's talk about it. Mr. Beer, you noticed, and you noted in your opening and several times throughout this hearing, that U.S. job openings are at record highs, correct?
That's right.
And have we been able to have a consistent level of among our current citizenship to be able to fill those job openings?
Oh, absolutely not. U.S. population growth right now is at the lowest in its entire history.
Yes, U.S. population growth is at the lowest in our entire history, and we've seen comparatively when other countries in similar circumstances, low population growth, but also when they pass very anti-immigrant or just make it very difficult to welcome immigrants legally, what do we see in their economic performance comparative to the United States when the United States enacts proper and open immigration policy?
Well, we've seen this in a number of countries. You take Japan, for example. For many years, they had a completely closed society. They ended up with a huge population of elderly people with no one to care for them, no one to pay into those systems. And now they're finally opening up because they're recognizing the crisis that it has created by keeping people out and preventing people from contributing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it shows that that countries that adopt anti-immigrant policies invariably end up, especially with the demographic trends that the United States has, end up in economic stagnation. In fact, what we're actually seeing is that this is starting to precipitate here in the United States. I'd like to submit this article from PBS NewsHour to the record, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Now, what we have here is that there are even some lawmakers in states like Wisconsin, Ohio, and Iowa that are proposing the loosening of child labor laws in their state because they have so many jobs that are left unfulfilled. We have seen teenagers dying in states like Wisconsin, Missouri, and Michigan because so many jobs are going unfilled, and many of these Republican legislatures would rather roll back child labor laws and put 11 and 13-year-olds back in the workplace than allow immigrants into their community and do what they've always done. Mr. Beer, let's say 50 years ago, would you say that it would be easier, that the United States perhaps had an easier immigration, more orderly immigration, perhaps an easier immigration policy then than say now?
No, I don't think it was any easier back then. It was pretty much the same. We had a pretty much stagnation for a century when it comes to legal immigration policy in the United States.
So we've had stagnation. When we go back maybe 100 years, what would you say?
Look, before the Immigration Act of 1924, the United States had a process whereby if you were not a criminal, you were not a public charge, you could come into the United States and work and live indefinitely. Anyone in the world could come to our country, except for the Chinese.
Yes.
But for the most part, anyone in the world could come.
And so that was the standing immigration policy about 100 years ago, meaning that unless you are an African-American member of this body, unless you are a descendant from Puerto Rico, Guam, or a U.S. territory, virtually every single member of this committee is here today as a result of, and thanks to, more open U.S. immigration policies. And the idea of slamming the door when we desperately need these migrants, when we desperately need it, and what we need is an orderly process. It's not that we don't need or want folks to come. It's that we actually have to make it easier for these individuals to participate in our economy, get a job, support themselves, and live the American dream. And what this conversation is about defending the American dream. We cannot allow that to change. And that's why Democrats in Congress are using immigration policy and advocating for immigration policy that can be documented, that people can get a job, put a shirt on their back, support their kids without being a public charge, and defend the very soul of what it means to be an American. And with that, I yield back.